11 billion. That's how many entities we're going to have on the planet by 2050. And I deliberately say entities because besides our 9.7 billion humans, we're going to have 1.3 billion, this billion or more, pet cats and dogs on the planet eating as much protein as a human. Now, have you ever thought about this problem? How we're going to feed all these people and their pets? How we do this is the question of our time. We're at a once-in-a-generation crossroads, and the decisions we make today will cascade down through the decades for decades to come. So what are our crossroads opportunities? Well, let's just recap where we are at the moment and look at what business as usual looks like. At the moment, we currently use 50% of all the arable land on the planet for food production. Of that, 2/3 is used for animal agriculture in some way, shape or form. And if we look at fresh water, 92% of freshwater withdrawals are for agriculture. So how do we produce the 50 to 70% more food that we're going to need by 2050 to feed all of our entities? Well, it can't come from our existing sources. It's going to have to come from other sources that use less arable land and fresh water. Because how far can we push current planetary boundaries? I would say, given the amount of arable land and fresh water that we currently use, not very far, if at all. We need to change our paradigm. Our planet is not an infinite well of resources. It's more like a closed environment space station. So what do we do if we want to produce this 50 to 70% food that we need? As I said, just doing business as usual is not going to cut it. I mean, we could, but we'd have to deforest the entire planet. And I would suggest that probably would not end well. So what this is all about in a nutshell is about filling the gap between what we can produce sustainably within planetary boundaries and the amount of food that we're going to need in 2050 to feed our 11 billion entities. So, what's the answer? What's the way out of the maze? What we need to do is choose the option that minimises resource usage to sustainably reimagine the global food system using technologies. So, why technologies? Well, you can't talk about food from farm to fork without talking about technologies. It's now everywhere in food. Food used to be a sleepy technological backwater compared to industries like the electronics industry, but no more. As we'll see, technology is now everywhere in food. But it hasn't always been this way. For me, things started changing back in 2017. So, July 2017, I'm at home, just got up, nice first hot cup of coffee, and I start looking at my emails. And I'm reading my emails, I'm looking at podcasts, webinars, and I'm going like, wow, I didn't even know that technology existed. Wow, look, there's a technology advancing far faster than I ever thought it could, and consumer trends just rocketing into the future. So I sat back, and suddenly I realised in my 25 years in the food industry, I had never seen the rate of change I'd seen at that point. So over the coming weeks and months, I started researching all of these technologies, and I noticed that they seemed to come into a common set of upper-level technologies, overarching technologies. And then I had to decide, okay, which are the most important of these technologies? Which are the ones that are going to have the most influence on the future of food? So what we needed, I realised, was a roadmap. Something to guide us towards the future of food, but not a static roadmap, more like a GPS. Something that reacts in real time to all the changes coming along before we reach our destination in the future. So, what are those technologies that I believe are the most influential technologies? Well, I came down to 5 exponential technologies driven by 3 accelerated technologies that would determine the future of food for decades to come. Now, just to be clear, I'm not saying that conventional animal agriculture and crops will somehow disappear. Far from it. But just that these technologies are going to be the ones that are really going to drive the future of food. So what are these technologies? They're alternative proteins, cellular agriculture, genomics, the microbiome, and synthetic biology. All driven by our 3 accelerators: AI, quantum computing, and sensors. All leading to our exponential food future. And I bet you're probably wondering, what the heck is a exponential food future? Well, it's built on 2 key concepts. As we said, food is now technology. And the second key concept is built on the first. One thing we know about technologies is that they advance exponentially. And a good example of exponential growth is Moore's law. Who's here has heard of Moore's law of computing? Few people? Yes. It basically says that the number of transistors on a computer chip doubles every 18 months to 2 years, which doubles your computing power. So with exponential growth, after end of 2 years, it's 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. After 14 years, you have over 100 times increased computer power. And of course, that neatly segues me into a great example of this exponential change. This is personal computing 1975 style. This is the IBM 5100, the world's first portable computers. I too once had hair like that, but that is a whole other story. Who would like to give me a guess how much that computer Mr. Gordon has his hand on? How much does it weigh? Give me a guess. How many kilos? 15? Any more? Any on that? 50? It weighed 23 kilos. Do not put that on your airplane tray table. It will not end well. And this machine, fully spec'd up, maximum storage, maximum RAM, and some offline storage and a printer, cost the princely sum of $19,750 in 1975. Now that is a staggering $115,333 in today's terms. Now, even more staggering though, is this top-of-the-line machine came with 64K of storage and RAM. Not megabytes, not gigabytes, 64K. Now, the latest Galaxy Z Fold comes with 10 million times the storage at 1/1000th of the cost, at 1/100th of the weight. That is the power of exponential change. And exponential change is important because we humans, we are linear creatures, right? A day is a day, a week is a week, A year is a year. We might feel like time goes slower or faster, particularly when we're on holidays, but it doesn't really. It's the same. It's linear. But it's very dangerous to think linearly in an exponential world, because this is what happens. Our friend down the bottom left there, yeah, I know why business is going. I know what's happening, no problems. I'll just extrapolate that out, and they extrapolate along the dotted line. They look up later on and go, that is not where I thought I would be, because that was not a straight line that they were using to extrapolate from. That was the start of an exponential curve. And where they end up is quite different to where they thought they would be. That's our exponential shock factor. Now just imagine if your business was using the dotted line to project where you thought the future was going to be, and all your strategies were based on that. So where do these concepts lead us? Food is now technologies advancing exponentially. The future of food is techsponential. Now, one of our 3 accelerators, of course, bears more talking about at the moment than the others, and that is, of course, AI. And we touched on some of the things AI can do this morning.
Wake up, Daddy's home.
Welcome home, sir.
Now, who would like an AI like that? Something that greets you when you come home, personal assist, not just a smartphone or a smart speaker. That is Jarvis from the Iron Man movies. And if you don't know the Iron Man movies, part of the Marvel universe, this is Tony Stark's personal AI. And it's not only his personal AI, it runs his house, it's his assistant at work, it does all sorts of things for him, and basically looks after his life. Now, until recently, an AI like that seemed like something out of fantasy, something decades away. And then suddenly, like all exponential technologies, AI burst onto the scene. ChatGPT was released on November the 30th, 2022. And within 5 days, it had over 1 million users. And the world would never be the same again. Now, just to be clear, we're not talking about traditional AI with its nice, neat tables, where the output of the AI is determined by explicit human programming. What we're talking about is generative AI, where the AI learns from the data that it's trained on and comes up with novel output. It answers questions you didn't even know you had. And the space is not standing still, as you can see from the videos playing behind me. Now, these were generated by OpenAI's Sora video generating AI. And in case you missed it, this is unedited direct output from Sora. All they did was program in the prompts, which is a description of what you wanted in the English language, and it generated these movies. That is how powerful generative AI can be. And what we're going to see is more and more of this. And the space is not standing still. I mean, anyone who gets news, who here gets newsletters in their inbox? I mean, if you get newsletters in your inbox, technologies are at the top of the list. Newsletters, webinars, conferences, all bombarding you with all sorts of events and things that will have an effect on your business. And the effect this will have on the food and agriculture business has got companies wondering, what the heck is all this going to mean for me, and particularly the rendering industry? So if we look at what this is going to mean for industry, the main one this is going to affect in the rendering industry is the ability to optimize your processes. Now, I don't have an example from the rendering industry. I don't know anyone who's doing this yet, but I was talking to a gentleman called Peter Ralph at the University of Technology in Sydney, and he is an algae expert, if not the algae expert in Australia. He and his team, decades worth of experience, They're trying to optimize their algae process to produce as much algae weight, as much biomass as possible. So they did that. And I thought they were pretty good, huh? They turned it over to the generative AI. It increased that biomass production by 30%. Now, they're not quite sure how it did it, because at the moment most AIs are a bit of a black box. You ask it the question, it gives you the answer. What went on in between? Who knows? They're fixing that. But that's the sort of thing that you can get. And imagine if you could get even a 5 or 10% increase in output from your rendering operations. What a competitive advantage that would be. And with generative AI, whoever owns the data has the advantage. So if you've got years, decades of data, parameters you used, outputs, chemical analyses, quality analyses and everything, and you feed it into the generative AI and ask it to give you some optimal conditions, or even optimize on the go, that is going to be a major advantage. Now, the other area that's going to affect the food industry in particular is going to be in new product development and research and development, so NPD and R&D. So meet your new NPD and R&D team. Well, okay, maybe not quite like that. My apologies to any R&D and NPD people in the audience, but it will look something like this. If you don't have a generative AI in your business, in the next 12 to 18 months, or at least a strategy for generative AI, you risk being so far behind you may never catch up. Remember our friend, linear versus exponential. And if you wait too long, the gap will be huge. So let's look at an example, what I would call chat NPD. Now, a company called Vivi Cola in Switzerland, they asked ChatGPT, that anyone can get, give me a vegan craft soda with proven health benefits. So it gave them a formulation using the haskap berry. And then they said, can we please have a name as well? And it came up with Vivi Nova. They said, great, got a formulation, got a name. So then they tried the formulation. I'm sure they tweaked it a little bit. They mixed in the sugar, the chicory, the haskap berry, which is apparently a berry that grows in Northern Europe. Don't know whether you heard it, but I hadn't. And they tried it, and of course the technologists always love their own products, right? I mean, if they make a product, they're going to love it. They showed it to some other people within the industry, and they said, the company said, yeah, that's great, that's good. Then they said, we need a label. Please please Unreal 3D Engine and Midjourney, please give me a label inspired by the haskap berry. So, dutifully, the AIs gave them a label. Now, all of this, they claim this whole work that they did took them 2 days. Now, even if you say, well, that's 2 days work over a few weeks or even a month, that's still phenomenal. And it might be a bit of an outlier, but it certainly shows the capability of something like a generative AI, both for the rendering industry and associated industry. We heard earlier on the panel, AI in pet food. So generative AI has a huge amount of applications. And we're seeing lots of the major food companies come into the space. We've got Mars with Pipa, who are looking at formulations. We've got Notco with their plant-based products using their Giuseppe version 2.0 generative AI to formulate plant-based products. McCormick Foods working with IBM on their ingredients. And in the private space, we've got companies like here, AI Palette, another company called Tastewise. And they're going to come up with some novel products that we've never seen before. So even if AI does end up destroying the world, we're going to have some tasty products in the meantime. And generative AI and technologies are not something that you can leave to the techies in R&D and NPD, or even leave to your IT department to have a look at and come back and tell you what's going on. Do you remember Kodak? A Kodak moment used to be a happy thing. Snaps of children on the beach running, all sorts of things. Now it means you're going out of business. So unless companies want to experience their own Kodak moment, they need to understand the impact of technologies, and chief amongst those technologies at the moment is, of course, AI. But AI can be used not just for those purposes, it can be used for sustainability as well. You can feed it data and it can come up with insights almost instantaneously that you can use within your business to increase your sustainability, optimize your business, make decisions that will optimize your profit as well as your sustainability. So you don't have to keep worrying, if I do this, it will cost that. It will be able to find the optimum solution for you to minimize the impact on your business. And that's just the tip of the iceberg for all of the things that AI can do for our businesses. Now, we're going to have a look at some of these technologies that impact the rendering industry. So I'm just going to talk about 3 of them quickly. That's alternative proteins, cellular agriculture, and synthetic biology. Now, with alternative proteins, why am I talking about that? Because we know protein supply affects the meat industry, which affects rendering. And I'm not going to bore you with plant-based products, right? How about food from air? Yep, air. A company called Solar Foods. They suck air into their proprietary equipment. They separate out the moisture, the carbon dioxide, and the nitrogen. They split the water into hydrogen and oxygen, hence, with using solar energy, hence Solar Foods. And then they treat the CO2 and the nitrogen, combine them all together with some nutrients and some microbes, and they grow microbes that can be structured to make alternative protein products. And that can be anything from meat substitutes to ice creams, dairy-type products, all sorts of things. And they have just signed a contract, they've just completed their first plant, Plant 01 in Finland, operational now, making 10 to 20,000 tonnes of this product. And they've just signed a contract with huge Japanese company, Ajinomoto, to produce flowering mooncakes and dairy ice cream sandwiches. So that product's on the market now. Now, we're all used to getting food from plants. I mean, soy proteins, wheat, etc. But how about food from wood? Now, when we chop down a tree, all we want to construct buildings and so on is that nice, straight, central trunk, right? We don't want the branches, we don't want the leaves, we don't want the bark, we don't want the sawdust. What happens to that product? It's usually just disposed of, sometimes burned. Well, this company, our Biome, is turning that into a substrate to grow microbes again, which can be used for things like aquaculture and can even be used to make human products. And it's highly sustainable because we're not growing the wood just for food, we're upcycling the waste products of the lumber industry. And if we look at, we've talked earlier yesterday about press cake. Now, sunflowers, the 3rd largest oil source in the world. It's estimated there's somewhere around 20 million tonnes of sunflower press cake produced every year. That has 37% protein. So we're looking at somewhere between 5 to 7 million tonnes of protein could be produced by utilising this press cake. And in the EU, EIT have got their project, which is looking at turning this press cake into alternative protein products. Now, we talked about our pet friends, and no conversation would be complete without looking at pets. Now, this is unicorn pate, which is a plant-based pate for cats. Now, it's notable because cats are generally considered obligate carnivores. They must eat meat protein because they need the amino acid taurine. Now, this product has been fortified with taurine, so cats no longer need to eat meat. And obviously that has a major influence on the pet food industry, which we talked about at our panel this morning. And the next technology is cellular agriculture. Now, we're talking about cellular agriculture because, again, the best known example is cultivated meat, where you take a few cells from an animal and you grow meat in huge stainless steel fermenters. Now, that's been on the market since 2020 in Singapore, and in 2022 they approved chicken breasts for sale in butchers in Singapore. Now, that product, obviously not commercially on the market, but again, we're looking at signals of the future. And this technology can even be used to make things that don't currently exist. This is from a company called Vow Foods. They have created a forged product which is made from the mythical animal, the qualia. And as they say, the qualia was created for no other reason than to be delectable. So you can actually create things that don't exist. Now, the last technology I want to talk about is synthetic biology. As we talked about, one of the key themes has been feedstock. We have a company called Gaft in the Netherlands using what they call precision fermentation. They've genetically altered a microbe to make the fatty acids that can go straight into SAF production without any further processing. As they claim, 20% higher value than Eucos. So that then increases the availability of feedstock for SAFs quite significantly. And then we have our friend, the black soldier fly. Who's heard of the black soldier fly? Lots of people used a lot for aquaculture and feeds and things like that, but it only contains about 30% fat, which makes it uneconomical, right, to use as an oil source for SAFs. A company called Bargera has genetically altered the larvae of the black soldier fly to be 60% fat, which they say makes it economically viable for SAF production. They are going to supply their first larvae to growers at the end of this year, and they expect to see trial products next year. A long time to scale, but there's another increase in the availability of feedstock for things like SAFs. And we have another company called No Palm Ingredients. They at the moment are focusing on palm oil, hence no palm. And what they've done is they've used something called directed evolution. They take a yeast and they put it in conditions where it needs to be able to change itself to grow, so it spontaneously mutates. Then they take that mutation and they increase the conditions, and they increase the conditions, and they increase the conditions, until they've got yeast cells full of oil, which they can tune by the growing conditions that they use, and it can be used as a palm oil substitute, and there's nothing to say that, like our friends at Gaft, that it couldn't be used for SAFs as well. Now, of course, we look at all these technologies, and technologies are wonderful, right? But if the consumer won't buy it, who cares? And who is our consumer? Everybody hears about Gen Z, right? Gen Z this, Gen Z that, Gen Z if you're American friends, always talking about Gen Z. But the generation we need to look at, if we look into 2030 and beyond, is Generation Alpha, those born 2010 to 2024. By the end of the year, there will be 2 billion Gen Alphas on the planet, the largest generation the planet has ever seen. At the end of the boomers, there were only 3.5 billion people on the planet. There will now be 2 billion in one generation. And these people, these are our Gen Alphas, because Gen Alpha will be spread from India down through Southeast Asia, Indonesia, and China. That is where the majority of Gen Alphas will be. And if we look at a study done in the US, 81% of millennial parents said their children had influenced their last purchase. 71% said they bought something to do with their child's favourite character or TV show. And every millennial parent I've spoken to has said, yeah, if our kid or kids wants to do something, we generally end up doing it. And we've got to remember, these generations are not just digital natives, they are technology natives. They have grown up with Spot the Boston Dynamics dancing robot, mRNA vaccines, generative AI now, and probably in their lifetime, a colony on Mars. So they are technology natives. Now, you can't do too much research on children. It is, of course, frowned upon. But if we look at previous generations, a study in the US showed that 77% of Gen Zs were comfortable with technology being used to make their food. 68% for millennials, Gen X and boomers tied at 58%. So if we extrapolate that to Gen Alpha, it's highly likely they're going to be quite comfortable with technologies used to make their food. And another recent study showed that 63% of Gen Alphas want the latest technology. And 43% of them, 46%, want technologies that don't even exist. And what you've got to remember is that these Gen Alphas, because they are technology natives, whatever one Gen Alpha wants or likes spreads in days, weeks, maybe even minutes, halfway across the world. And the best example of this is Korean products, K-beauty and K-pop products. Their popularity is immense. We have boy bands like BTS, we have girl bands like Blackpink, and they have spread across the globe. I was talking to someone in India a few months ago. They said, yeah, the latest trend in India is Korean-flavoured salty snacks in India. That's how far and quick and wide these trends can spread. And if we look at pet ownership, the biggest owner of pets by generation are millennials, which of course is with their children. So their children are going to continue with pets, and they will be the largest pet-owning generation, probably not just in absolute terms, but in relative terms, number of pets per household that we've ever seen. And what do Gen Alphas value? Above all, they value purpose. If you think, oh, I will wait until 2028 or something when the oldest of them are 18, and then I'll start telling them about the wonderful things we do as a rendering industry, you will miss an entire generation. At 8 years old, a Gen Alpha knows as much as a previous generation at 18 and other generations at 80. They over-age on information. They're saying, Mummy, Daddy, I don't like that nasty company. I don't think we should buy from them. If you buy from them, I'm not going to eat it. Like I said, where the alpha goes, the family will follow. And the rendering industry has such a fantastic sustainability and circular economy story to tell. There is no such thing anymore as the invisible industry. When you have access to your smartphone and the internet, you can find anything. And if you think the rendering industry is going to slip under the radar, I think you're sorely mistaken. And so selling that, and what Sylvia talked about was prove it and just go out and show it and be proud of what the industry does. Don't just simply think we can skate under the radar. Don't worry about it. It's not going to happen. Now, we've covered a lot of ground so far this afternoon, but the key thing to remember is that all of these technologies are science fact. They are not science fiction. Some of them are here now. Some of them may take years. Others may take decades to come to fruition. But it's only the impact that's yet to be felt. And if you're still thinking, oh, Tony, bit far-fetched, remember me? Remember our friend, Miss Robert L. Gordon? 10 million times the storage at 1/1000th of the cost at 1/100th of the weight, and all in less than 50 years. And what you've got to remember is that today's reality was yesterday's science fiction. And that brings us right back to our crossroads option. What crossroads option should we adopt? I think we need to adopt the crossroads option that enables us to produce a world of food abundance, even with 11 billion entities on the planet, and keep it within planetary boundaries. I think the rendering industry has a vital role to play there, in ensuring that we've maximised the amount of nutrition that we can get from the current global food system. And let's never forget, the world's greatest problems are the world's greatest opportunities. And by adopting the sustainability, the circular economy that the rendering industry is adopting, it can play that vital part in feeding our global growing population sustainably, healthily, and fairly, and in the process, help invent the future of our space station planet. Thank you.